I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of Nishnawake, Ottawa, and Mississauga peoples. Item 2, confirmation of the agenda, that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby accepts the agenda for March 6, 2023 council meeting as presented. Do I have a mover? Deputy Reeve Faulkner, Councillor Whitfield. See a show of hands. Carried. Disclosure of pecuniary interests. Seeing none. Public comment. This is the opportunity for the members of the public to speak on an item of business on the agenda. 2 minutes per person. Just please come up to the mic and say your name, address, and the agenda item.
Hello, Wayne Johnson. I don't know if I'm on the agenda or not, but I'd like to say a couple words of some information I presented 2 weeks ago at the last meeting regarding the ICE policy in Wingham. Took away some of the feedback from council and questions. I contacted about 7 municipalities in our area, with 5 of those municipalities playing the same hockey league as we do. It is quite common in this area to have ice available to the public mid to late August, with almost all having ice available by Labor Day. So I'd like council to give that some consideration, to move that policy back to the original policy from 2012 that shows ice in Wingham by Labor Day each year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Sandy Greer, and I'm based in Blythe since late 2019. I would like to ask the councillors whether any action had been taken about the very high levels of strontium that were in reports from 2019, 2020, and 2021. And I haven't checked whether there's the most recent report that has come out. The reason is, in those reports I read for 3 years, apparently there is a historic amount of strontium in the Blythe water system, the municipal system, that is 7 to 8 times higher than the safety level. And I've done some international research, both in the United States and elsewhere, that there are systems that could be used to reduce strontium, even if it's natural strontium in the bedrock. So I'm not talking about strontium 90, which comes from the nuclear power plant. I'm talking about other types of strontium that are in the environment, but they are still extremely dangerous, especially for babies and young children, in terms of teeth and bone structure developing. And so it's something that definitely needs to be investigated, unless it already has. So I'd appreciate any research done on that issue. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? Those points were taken. Okay. Seeing no other people, okay, we'll carry on then. Consent agenda, would any member want to discuss any item from 5.1.1 to 5.1.2, 5.3, 10? Go ahead, Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. This is in bills. Check number 3499. It was one towel truck. It's regarding a plow, snow plow, for $146,000. I'm just wondering what the story is behind that. Because it was for, yeah, if you wouldn't mind, Chris. Like, I'm wondering, is it the one that's in the capital expenditures now, or it's a previous one?
Through Reeve Heifer to Councillor Palmer, that is the 2021 budgeted pickup truck, or 6-ton plow truck, sorry. We paid for the chassis in 2021, or the frame in 2021, and the rest of the truck was actually physically delivered last week, I believe. And then the one that you're seeing in this year's budget, because there's a 3-year turnaround from purchase to delivery, we've been budgeting half of it each year, so that in year 3, it's fully funded.
So that's new money then?
This one here that you're speaking of, Councillor, is already been budgeted for.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Deputy Reed?
Yeah, through you, Reeve, this question is on 3.1, or 5.3.1, the letter from Asheville, Colborne, Wallinash, letter of support of asking for a relook at the electoral list. I was wondering, Carson, did we find any discrepancies in our list this year? Is this the single problem in their area, or is it?
So through you, Your Worship, to answer Deputy Falconer's question, the voters list is, there's definitely room for improvement. So the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation has been responsible for pulling together the voters list for many, many years now. That responsibility has now shifted to Elections Ontario. So there was partial amounts of Elections Ontario data for the 2022 municipal election, and me personally, as the returning officer, I'm hopeful that that will lead to a continued voters list. However, what ACW would be referring to is an issue that all municipalities would have experienced across the board. In MPEC's data really lacks around your boarders, your renters, that kind of data, because it's based on property sales data, right? So the continual issue is renters who have lived in our municipality every year are required to come in to get themselves added to the voters list, or basically go through the voterlookup.ca process in advance of the preliminary list being pulled together because of MPAC's lack of tenant data. Yeah, every municipality that would have ran an election is probably experiencing the same thing. So it may not be a bad idea for council to support that resolution.
Then I would like to say that, put motion to support that resolution.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so we'll pull that from the consent, and then we'll deal with that after.
Okay. Nothing else from the members? Okay, so,
So,
go ahead.
if I may, Your Worship, so your new motion would be that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby adopts consent item 5.1.1, and further that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives consent items 5.1.2 to 5.3.10, exclusive of 5.3.1, for information.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor McBurney, all in favor? Carried.
So then you would deal with your second motion, which is in regard to item 5.3.1. And that would be something along the lines of that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby directs staff to send a letter of support to the Township of Ashfield, Colborne, Wawanosh regarding their resolution on the accuracy of the permanent list of electors.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Van Hitterson, all in favor? Carried.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Will we only have to send this letter to the Township of Ashfield, Colborne, Wawanosh, or to the other people as well as what is their notice in the bottom there?
Yeah, we,
Letter.
through your worship, to answer Councillor Van Hiersum's question, we would put it through the channels. We normally would reach out to the responsible entity for the voters list, as well as the municipalities,
Okay.
all Ontario municipalities.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, nothing further, members? Okay, we'll go to number 6, public meetings, hearings, and delegations. I'd like to welcome Richard Hall and David Shaw, the Wingham Lions Club, to come forward at this time. If you wouldn't mind coming up on the stage, that would be great.
turn it over to, thank you, Mr. Hall.
Reeve and councillors of North Huron. I am Lion Richard Hall, and with me is Lion Dave Shaw, and in the audience are members of our Lions Club of Wingham. The Lions Club of Wingham is very concerned about the budgeting process being followed this year and appreciates the opportunity to convey some of these concerns to you. And we've summarized them in 7 points. Number 1, we find it very difficult to understand why a budget requiring a property tax increase of 21% would even be proposed at any time, but especially now, with higher interest rates, inflation, higher food costs, etc., affecting every property owner in the township. Please reduce it to something reasonable, such as 5 to 7%. Number 2, recreation is not an optional item in any community. It is a very important physical and mental benefit to all the residents of the township. Our club has existed in Wingham for 85 years, and during that time, Lions members have contributed many thousands of dollars and volunteer hours to recreational facilities and activities here. Accordingly, we strongly suggest that you find items other than recreation to reduce or eliminate in your proposed budget to bring it down to a reasonable increase. We believe that recreational facilities should not be devalued or interrupted just because they don't make money. That's not the intention. They are there to benefit taxpayers as well as draw others into the community. Indeed, it would be surprising if recreational facilities did make money, but that's not the point. The point is that taxpayers should expect their taxes to support the recreational facilities in our community and their uninterrupted operation. Indeed, for some, these facilities are essential to their health. Number 3, another item that we suggest you review is the new council chamber. We do not believe, nor do we perceive the residents of our township to believe, that spending $450,000 of our residential taxes to create a new council chamber is a good idea, no matter where it is, but especially when it's not in a building that we own. What is the matter with using our recently renovated, beautiful, and underutilized theater where we are now? Why can't you use the existing council chambers on the main floor of the town hall? Surely whoever or whatever you have allowed in there to displace you can be moved someplace else close for much less than $450,000. What about a storefront down or across the street? What about a portable out the back with a connecting covered walkway, if necessary? What about the old post office museum building? Number 4, of course, the obvious item to be deleted is the $1.3 million for decommissioning the house and dam, which would eliminate our beautiful pond. As we have indicated to this council several times during the recent past, our Lions Club strongly supports the rehabilitation of the dam so that we can again enjoy the pond for recreational and aesthetic purposes. We understand that the last engineering report indicated that the dam can indeed be revitalized. We also understand that the Citizens Committee has offered to fundraise all the monies required for such a project, and our club would be willing to help in that regard. To do nothing with the dam this year would cost us nothing, or indeed, it would cost us nothing to postpone that indefinitely, except for a small penalty for not proceeding with the contract that's been awarded. There's no pressing reason to decommission it in 2023 or any time. Furthermore, we understand that the required government approvals have not even been received yet. Given that the house and dam is a somewhat controversial issue with the taxpayers, postponing any action for a year would give you time to put the question of what to do with the dam to a referendum of eligible voters in Wingham and would cost much less than the proposed decommissioning. Number 5, we question why another $150,000 is required for the work on the entrance to the town hall. Wasn't that project and the financing for it in the 2022 budget such that all necessary funds to complete it have already been collected? And something else we don't understand is, wasn't the building already fully accessible with the lift that exists on the south side? Number 6, please be advised that our club, the Lions Club of Wingham, completely supports the Blythe Lions Club with respect to their presentation to you regarding the importance of the Blythe and District Community Center to their community. And number 7, we also note that there is no street construction or repaving work proposed in Wingham in the budget, and for that matter, no street or road work proposed anywhere in the township. At least in Wingham, we suggest there is certainly the need for such work, and we hope that some is planned soon. We all know that keeping our infrastructure in good condition is vitally important. So thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation. We trust that Council will take these matters into consideration when finalizing the budget for 2023. And should you wish to contact us further, please have Clerk Lamb contact Club Secretary Line Earl Dalmage at the address that's on the letterhead that you've got in the copies of this presentation. And so on behalf of our Lions President, Murray Wales, Lion Murray Wales, and the Lions Club of Wingham, we thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, and I have to say,
May I have your attention for another 30 seconds,
oh, I'm
please?
sorry.
Is that possible? Sorry, you
Yeah.
had your head down.
Yeah.
It is very important for every person in this theater to hear every word that is said up here. When I was sitting in the front row here tonight, I couldn't hear some of the things that were being said from up here. It is crucial that you talk to every person at the very back, and then everybody from then there up will hear you, because it's so important for what you have to say for them to hear that. So whether the speak into the mic more or turn up the sound system or whatever, thank you, Reeve.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shaw. As I said before, I just want to thank the two of you for your comments, and the staff will be bringing back a report to us for our budget real soon, and it's coming up in a week tonight. And I just, at this time, will ask, does anybody from the council have anything they'd like to share? Go ahead.
I would, thank you, Reeve. So, again, I'd like to thank you, gentlemen, for coming out tonight. It really does make a difference to hear these presentations. It makes a difference for the way I think and the way I vote anyways. Letters help as well. So I do just want to, thank you guys for coming out tonight. I think a lot of the things in your letter make sense, at least to the way I think. I think the job of a municipality is to provide the best services possible to its residents. And, I think a municipality can lose sight of the fact that, the municipality is actually supposed to work for the residents as opposed to working for the legislation to fulfill the legislation that a municipality also has to follow. So, it's always a great reminder to hear from people like yourself. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Councillor Palmer, please.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. I'd like to echo that, gentleman. Yeah, thanks for your report. Can't hear you. Really? Yep.
It's hard to hear.
Okay, I'd like to thank you, gentlemen, for your report. Is that better? Okay. Thanks for telling me. Yeah, I'd like to comment on a couple of your points. And I guess the main one would be the first one, the budget. Like, we've been hit with so many emails and letters and what have you about this magic 20.6-7% or something. You've got to remember that it's the first go-around. Every municipality deals with it. Every government deals with it the first time around. So the media always blows it up, which is unfortunate and gets people riled up. We all pay taxes here too, so do we want to pay it? No. So we're fighting hard and staff is fighting hard because they've heard from us that it's unacceptable. So everybody, the staff right now, they're going to be making a proposal back to council shortly, and then we look at it again, and if it needs to be cut more, then we look at things. So always be aware and don't be excited by the first time around, please. It makes it hard on us too. We don't mind hearing from you, but it's just, doesn't have to happen yet. You know, it's the third go around, then nail us if you don't like it, okay? So that's something to remember. The facilities, absolutely, I feel strongly about how important they are. They're the heart of each of the communities. The way our municipality is formed, you know, with basically 3 communities all hooked together because of amalgamation. It makes it more difficult, but that's reality. So each arena is important to everybody, and you know, we have to look at that in a serious fashion. So, okay, the council chamber. It was last council that approved of it, and it was, you know, around that 200,000, and all of a sudden it's 450. It's unacceptable to me, and I hope it comes back to us, because I think it has to be reviewed absolutely, and look at it in a different light. And look outside the box a little bit and figure out other ways of putting the chambers somewhere. And I do like going back to our original spot, because that's where it should be. So anyways, we'll be, hopefully, with staff coming back to us, we will revisit it, I hope. The dam, it's done. It's already been passed. It's in motion. No, David. It's in motion. And you don't change things once things are going. And that's the way it is right now. And the front of the building, I had the same question about that 150, because it should have been all budgeted last time, and the previous council, and I was told, and have to be corrected if I'm wrong, that it's sort of a contingency. It's there in case prices, the fee goes up, and I sure as heck hope it doesn't. So those are some of my comments.
Thank you very much, Councillor Palmer. Were there any other things from members? Seeing none? Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we'll go to our second delegation, and that's Andrew Garland from BM Ross Associates Limited of North Huron Water and Wastewater Infrastructure Capacity. Welcome, Andrew, at this time.
Thank you, Reeve Heffer, and members of council for having me tonight. My first test will be trying to get my presentation up here without screwing up the technology. Just saying, my first test will be trying to get the right presentation up here. So recognize a number of the faces here, but there are some new ones as well. And just a bit of a reminder, it would be not quite a year ago that I was here to speak with you last about water and wastewater infrastructure in your township. And really at that point in time, it was an update to a 2020 water and wastewater servicing master plan that we completed. And so this will just serve as an update to some of the information that was presented at that time when the master plan was completed. We call it the 2020 master plan because it was early that year that it was formally completed, but really the bulk of the analysis for that was done in 2019, which means that the data we were using was really from 2018 and before. So a few years have passed, and staff tasked us with updating the information that was found at that time, showing, what's the same and what's changed really, and then finally talk about, have the conclusions or findings from that first master plan changed at all, or is the information really the same? So just a bit of a refresher on some of the important terms that we deal with when looking at this. And again, some of this will look familiar to some of you. But if I go through any of this too quickly, really any time along the way tonight, I don't at all mind being interrupted. If I've gone through a slide too quickly, just flag me down and I'm happy to back up and go through it in a little more detail as we go. So in the world of servicing with water, when we look at your system as a whole, there's a rating for what we call total capacity, and that's when everything is working the way that we want it to. The Ministry of Environment has a guideline that infrastructure be viewed in terms of firm capacity, and that would be when you have multiple wells or multiple pumps in a system. What's the capacity when the largest one is out of service? And that's just a bit of I don't want to call it a safety precaution, but a bit of a way of looking at the system that when that one big pump is down for maintenance, rehab, that kind of work, do we still have enough firm capacity to meet the needs of the customer base? Maximum day demand is if you look at a calendar year, all the different days throughout the year, we look at what's the greatest one of those days in the year over that 24-hour period. And at really high demand times of the year, you can have consecutive days that are pretty close to that same max value. Peak demand is important, but it's never looking at a full day. It could be as short as a few minutes or a few hours. What's the highest demand experienced in a day? And so for water supply, maximum day is really the key thing if there's adequate storage to help meet those short-term peaks. If there's not enough storage to help meet those short-term peaks, then we really have to look at the peak demand for the supply being able to meet that. And just to help illustrate it a bit, this is a fictitious example of a typical water system though, so these values are just made up, but they really represent what's pretty common in most municipal systems. So this graph is just showing a typical fluctuation in demand over the course of a full 24-hour period. So starting at the left-hand side of the graph would be midnight, and then it carries through to midnight again at the end on the right-hand side. And so the blue line represents how demands typically change over a day. Middle of the night, there might be a little bit of demand for 24-hour businesses or people that have set their dishwashers or washing machines to run middle of the night. As people wake up in the morning, start to shower, make breakfast, demand's going to climb, and there's typically a bit of a peak, sort of early to mid-morning. It might subside during the middle of the day, and then maybe at lunchtime it rises a bit again. And then towards dinner time, people are coming home from work, making supper, showering, running the dishwasher. We'll hit a peak again, and then demand will subside over the course of the evening on to midnight. So some important concepts that we'd look at here would be, again, looking at some of the other lines here. That green line that's just drawn straight across, that'd be the average over the course of that day. So you can see there's actually quite a difference from the lowest time and the highest time compared to that average. And the orange line is representing, in this case, the capacity of the system, what it's rated for. And the key thing I think trying to point out here is that in this case, the capacity of the system is more than the average, so that's good. But the peak demand actually exceeds what the well supply or the treatment capacity is rated for. And in a case when you have adequate water storage in your system, that's not a problem, because those shorter term peaks, you're going to draw water from your storage facility to meet them, and then when demands subside, your system can recharge and replenish the stored water there. If there's not sufficient storage, then we got a bit of a problem here and would actually have to increase the system capacity to be able to meet those peaks. So there's a number of concepts at play there. I'll jump on to the next slide unless anybody has any questions about that right now. Again, this isn't representing any one of your systems right now. It's just an example to illustrate. And we'll talk more about your systems, of course, later on. In the world of wastewater, it can be a little bit different. We have much more concern for the average day flow over the course of a full calendar year. And the reason that we're concerned about that is that, well, all of the approval documents and the way that facilities are designed would be rated on that annual average flow basis, recognizing that things are going to fluctuate throughout the course of the year. Peak flow can be important. Certain styles of treatment plants do have a peak capacity rating. In fact, the Blythe treatment plant does have that, as well as the average day capacity rating. But again, similar to water systems, those are often short-term duration flows that we have to consider. So for treatment, where our main focus is usually that average day demand, that's how the compliance for your system in the eyes of the ministry will be judged. But for your collection infrastructure, sanitary sewers, pumping stations, we certainly have to pay attention to that peak flow rating. If that infrastructure doesn't have the capacity to handle the peak, then we get into problems like sewer backups and bypasses and overflows in the infrastructure. So to illustrate this a little bit, this is different from that water graph. This is again a fictitious example, but this is not over the course of a day. This would be over a full calendar year, and again, fairly representative of what might happen in a typical municipal system. The blue line representing just kind of month by month how things change. Typically in the springtime is when we're going to see some higher flows and hit some peaks. There can be some exceptions to that rule, but it's often the case, and it's usually revolving around snowmelt, high precipitation events. I have yet to see a sewer collection system out there that's completely watertight. So somehow groundwater or surface water has a way of getting into systems, and again, that's fairly common, but usually pretty short-lived. And so in springtime, we'll usually see some peaks and some higher day-to-day flows. As the summer drier months approach, flows will often subside to kind of low levels for the year, and then they might climb up again a bit more in the fall. So again here, the green line representing the average over the course of the year would be below that system rated capacity, the orange line, so that's good in an average flow basis. And if there were a peak rating for this plant, it could be problematic depending on where that peak rating is to have values hit that high. And we'll talk about that a bit more later on for your systems as well. So I'm going to jump in then to some information and findings from the 2020 master plan. And so when we're looking at these master plans, really we're looking at two scenarios, if you want to consider it that way. One would be sort of the existing conditions or baseline conditions, and then the purpose of master plan is really projecting out, as development happens or other changes happen, do we have the infrastructure that we need to be able to facilitate those changes? If not, what has to change? So a really important concept is that around servicing commitments. And what we mean by that, well, your existing customer base, obviously you're committed to providing them with service, but then we look at developments as well. And when we look at developments, we typically talk about them in terms of equivalent residential units. So to boil it down, one residential unit would typically be considered, one single detached home. And what's the water demand or wastewater flow associated with an average home like that? And then we'd scale it a bit for apartments or multi-residential units that might have, fewer persons per dwelling. And then we'd turn it all into an equivalent residential unit value. So at the time of the 2020 master plan for the community of Wingham, we were looking at a total of 579 ERUs. That 579 was comprised of 454 units for the former A2A lands or Maitland Estates, 100 units for the Hutton Heights area, and then just an allowance of 25 units for infill throughout the community. In addition to those ERUs, at the time, the cross-border servicing agreement in place with Morris Turnberry would have accounted for a little over 680 cubic meters per day of water and nearly 250 cubic meters per day of wastewater service. In Blythe, at that time, again, it was the existing customer base plus an allowance of 125 ERUs. At the time, 100 of those units linked to the Rutledge subdivision and an allowance of 25 infill in the community as well.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
On the cross-border servicing agreement, you're reporting here in cubic meters per day. What would that equal in the ERUs?
Good question. Off the top of my head, so I'd have to pull up something a little more firm, but it'll be over 300 ERUs on the water side of things, because we're looking at max day demand, and then for wastewater, it'd be a bit higher than that, because there's typically, although there's a lower number here, so maybe it'd be around 300 units for each one.
And you said that the ERU is equal to one semi-detached home?
One single detached home,
Thank you.
that flow. And so it's a good point. Every time you do these updates, that value can change a little bit, because we'll look at the most recent several years of data, look at the current number of customers, and then come up with some judgment on usage per customer. So it can change a bit, every 5 years when you do these updates.
And can I ask just a follow-up question? On the cubic meters on the service agreement, where did you find that number? Where does that number come from in the agreement when?
It would have been some schedule or appendix to whatever the agreement was in place at that time. I can't remember the date of that agreement off the top of my head, but back in 2019, 2020, that would have been the agreement on file at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick question through you. So just to clarify, that last bullet point, the top section, that was allocation, that wasn't usage.
Good point. That's right. That was allocation. Actual usage at the time was not anything close to what those values were. But for the purposes of the analysis, we considered it a commitment because, if that's what the agreement stated, those customers were able to use up to each day. We wanted to look at it in terms of, does the infrastructure have the capacity to meet those demands? But good point. So your water system in Wingham as a whole, the total rated capacity of both wells is pretty close to 12,000 cubic meters per day. Again, looking at that firm capacity concept with the largest well, which would be well 3 out of service, the firm capacity is a little over 5,000 cubic meters per day. And so at the time of the 2020 master plan, max day demand was not quite 2,300 cubic meters. Commitments, including those ERUs and the cross-border servicing agreement, and the cross-border servicing agreement, that value of close to 700 cubes per day would have been like an average number, so we made some adjustment for if there was a peak demand there or a maximum demand. So commitments at the time, sort of worst case, we considered to be a little over 2,100 cubic meters per day. So even with those pretty high level of commitments and the current max day demand, the firm capacity of the system was more than sufficient to meet that. And that would be in the basis that sufficient storage is provided to help meet short-term peaks. If there's not sufficient storage provided, then we'd have to look at those short-term peaks, which are usually about 1.5 times the max day demand. And in that case, there wouldn't be sufficient firm capacity. There'd be sufficient total capacity, but not firm to meet those short-term peaks. So the recommended project to come from that was really to replace the current standpipe that you have with one of larger capacity. In fact, I think that was the number one ranked priority in the master plan, and that's a project that's underway for you folks in planning for that. The wastewater system in Wingham on an annual average day basis, and that's the only basis the treatment plant's rated, of 3,400 cubic meters per day. At the time, the existing customer flow would have been a little over 2,300 cubic meters, commitments a little over 800, and so there was sufficient capacity for existing customers plus commitments. So no recommended work related to treatment capacity at the time. The collection system, which includes the Josephine Street sewage pumping station, the firm capacity of that station, about 100 liters per second, with both pumps running about 160. Even at that time, existing peak flows from time to time were above 160 liters per second, so a recommended project was to increase pump capacity at that station. Just not considered a major priority, but still recommended. And the collection sewer system itself, the northwest trunk sewer, which you may have heard of before, if not, this figure shows a little more than the whole northwest trunk sewer, but really I'm focused on the section of sewer starting in the red line there, starting about the north end of Josephine Street, and then carrying along the west there down towards the Josephine Street station, which would be where the red line ends towards the bottom of the figure. So sections of that sewer are currently pretty near or at capacity, and the reason it was of significant interest really relates to servicing that former A2A land, because the flows from that land would flow along the north to the west and then get into that sewer. So there was a recommendation to start planning for replacement of that northwest trunk sewer with a sewer of larger capacity, noting that there'd be some opportunity to stage that. It wouldn't have to all be done in one shot, but would require a little more thought to figure out the best way to stage that work. Moving to the Blythe systems, again starting with water, the total rated capacity of the system is pretty close to 2,900 cubic meters per day. The firm capacity is about 1,150, and that was considered sufficient for the current max day demand at the time in 2020 of a little over 1,000 cubic meters per day. Not sufficient for commitments of close to 300 cubic meters per day, and the fact that there's fairly limited storage in that system really exacerbates the issue here, because we do have to look at short-term peaks then. And so, again, on the total capacity basis, with everything working fine, it's not a big problem here, but looking at that, oh, I don't know what happened to me there.
Did the cord move on the projector at all? It's very finicky.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Carson. So really, two recommendations to come from that finding in Blythe. One would be to increase the firm capacity of the system, and really that can occur by adding a redundant well or a standby well at the site, and that would be the well number 5 site, would be the place to do it there. And that was a bit more of a short-term or immediate kind of project. And then longer term, it'd be recommended to start planning for additional storage in the community. The Blythe wastewater system, this plant has, of course, the average day rating of 730 cubic meters per day, sufficient for the existing customer usage of a little over 400 and commitments of about 75. There is a peak capacity rating for this plant of a little over 2,700 cubic meters per day. And really, from time to time, that is exceeded. When this master plan was done, looking at the past, several years of annual reports prior to that, it was noted that anywhere from 3 to 8 times per year, the plant did experience a bypass, so flows that couldn't be handled at that peak value, and up to 6.5% of the total annual flow in the system was bypassed. So there was a recommendation to initiate a Class EA to determine the best way to address that. The reason for recommending the Class EA is that really for any solution that could be implemented, whether it was, increasing the treatment capacity or if it was just adding some tankage to sort of store those short-term peaks, any of those solutions would be subject to Class EA requirements under the EA Act. The main pumping station in Blythe has a firm capacity of about 32 liters per second. And again, existing peak flows are pretty well at that station capacity. So the recommendation there was just to look at that station peak capacity in conjunction with the peak flows at the treatment plant. The master plan also looked at what we call linear infrastructure, so that'd be the water distribution mains, sanitary sewer collection pipes. And so as part of the project, you folks actually completed camera inspection, CCTV inspection of most of the sewer in Wingham and a good part of Blythe. And really that gives you an accurate, real life inspection and evaluation of the condition of the sewers. Water mains can't be cambered that way, but we can complete modeling and compare that to pressure and flow data that can be collected in the town. And so both of those exercises were completed. And then not as part of this master plan, but prior to this, road condition assessment was completed for the township. And really we worked with staff here to kind of combine all the information to come up with prioritization for street reconstruction work and a bit of a capital plan, kind of years 1 through 10 and then 11 through 20. It's really part science and part art. You got to do it in a way that makes sense and jives with other needs. And so it can be a bit of a moving target, but a plan was established and created with staff at the time. And really no major red flags or findings from that work, other than I just mentioned again the northwest trunk sewer already being identified as a capacity need. So moving on from that background and trying to look at what's changed for 2023, a bunch of numbers up here, but really I think the main takeaway is that if you compare these numbers, Wingham water system, in 2020, the max day demand was close to 2,300. Now it's close to 2,400, so not a huge change there. Sewage flow is actually down about 350 cubic meters per day, and we've seen that in a number of other communities. It's, I would suggest, just a seasonal thing. Some years are wetter, some are drier, and so you're going to see some fluctuation like that. Blythe water demand is actually down about 100 cubic meters per day from last time, and the sewage is up about 30 cubic meters per day. So, in my opinion, no real major changes there that would affect some of the conclusions related to flows the last time around. Yep.
Through you, Reeve, just curious, the water and sewer usage in Wingham is almost equivalent, like they balance each other, which makes sense. What come in, one tap goes out the other end. Why is Blythe so different, do you know? Like, why is it half the sewage versus the water?
Good question. And we, in fact, wouldn't often expect them to balance out in what's presented here, only because with sewage, we're focused on those average day flows, and with water, we're looking at those maximums. And so in terms of, what's like sewage has got kind of three components. There's true sewage coming out of people's plumbing. There's infiltration, which would be groundwater coming in through, cracks or leaks in the system. And then there's inflow, which would be from precipitation events. And so the true sewage and the water usage, we'd usually expect to come out pretty well matching. It would make sense. And then whatever's above and beyond that in sewage would come from the infiltration and inflow. So I'd suggest here that what this data probably shows is that in Wingham you got a little more just baseline infiltration and inflow that brings up that sewage value. In Blythe, you've got a relatively high water per ERU usage, and our thought is that it could be linked to short-term events, even things like the Threshers Reunion over a short number of days. But still, you got to account for them. There could be a number of days there where water demand is really brought up. That wouldn't show in the sewage data as much, again, because we're kind of averaging out over a year rather than looking at the individual days. So those would just be a couple of things that would lead to some of the differences here in these towns. But yeah, good question.
Councillor Palmer?
Yeah, through you, Rave. Andrew, I'm just wondering about regarding the sewage. Concentration of it, like how much water infiltrates, does that affect the system much? Like,
Yeah, good question. Yes and no. On the long haul, again, kind of looking at over the course of a year, it probably makes it a little bit easier to treat if there's some of that infiltration and inflow coming in. It dilutes the sewage a bit. That being said, if you get a great big peak flow come through your system, it can actually negatively affect the system and kind of wash out, I guess, call it like the good bugs that are in place. A wastewater plant's like it's like a mini ecosystem, and there's good biological activity going on in there to help remove contaminants as things go. If you get too high of a flow and kind of throw things off their sweet spot or their kind of stable point, that can wash things out and affect that. I wouldn't say it's a common problem though, and so it can affect treatment, but probably not to a huge degree. And certainly things I would think have been stable enough for enough years now that between operations and the way the plants are run, they'd have a pretty good handle on how things have been adjusted for those concentrations now.
thanks.
So other than changes in flow, we also looked here at changes in terms of commitments for each community. And so for Wingham, there's an increase of a little over 200 ERUs being contemplated at this time compared to 2020, but then also a really significant decrease in the commitment through the cross-border servicing agreement. And in the next slide, I think, I'll illustrate how that plays out in terms of your capacity in your system. In Blythe, the number of ERUs is actually decreased, and a big part of that is a number of the units considered commitments in 2020 have actually come online, and then the scale of one of the developments changed a little bit. A really key concept here in terms of what we're looking at for current reserve capacity is that in these commitments, we've talked with staff here and really lumped in, and planning staff at the county, and we've lumped in what I would call true formal commitments, subdivisions or developments that have had their application approved. But we've also got some allocation in here for proposed or pending developments that, might even be still confidential at this point in time. But we've wanted to consider those in discussing with staff kind of from again, in terms of capacity, kind of a worst case condition. If everything came to life that was being considered right now, would there be capacity for it? And again here, just flagging that there's no real big change in terms of water demand or wastewater flow. So if we look at commitments and capacities for your systems in Wingham, looking at water, there's actually a decrease in the level of commitment, and same for wastewater. And again, that's even though the number of ERUs has gone up, the decrease in the cross-border servicing agreement really reflects here, I think. And for Blythe, in terms of water commitments, the current usage being down for the last few years, even though the customers has gone up, that really shows us that the usage per customer has gone down. So the current number of commitments is actually down below the firm capacity of the system, and really not much of a change at all on the side of wastewater. There are a couple of these calculations that are still being formalized because there's a little bit of customer data that we want to double check to make sure these numbers are all good, but I don't suspect much here is going to change when we get those numbers.
Question?
Through you,
Just curious what numbers you used for the 2023 Wingham update for cross-border servicing commitments, since that's kind of in flux right now.
Okay, we used 60 cubic meters per day for both water and wastewater.
Okay, thanks.
So you'll see here that again in 2020, the Blythe water system, the commitments at that time were flagged as being above the firm capacity of the system, and it's actually a bit below the firm capacity right now. So to kind of summarize this, again, a bit of a different way. Wingham water supply, if that increase in storage linked to the standpipe replacement, if that proceeds, we're okay here. And in fact, there'd be uncommitted firm reserve for probably more than 1,200 ERUs, so quite a large surplus there. For wastewater treatment, again, the capacity is projected to be okay. It would put, with the commitments, it put the capacity of the plant right around 80%. And I'll talk about that 80% number in a minute and why that's significant. But even at that number, there'd be uncommitted reserve for probably more than 600 ERUs. So pretty good shape, I think, in Wingham there. In Blythe, the water supply, it would still be recommended that you consider an additional well to increase firm capacity and eventually look at storage, really because there's no meaningful uncommitted reserve right now. The other reason we look at storage is not just meeting those day-to-day or hour-to-hour customer demands. It has to do with fire protection. That's a pretty significant component of storage design. And so that would be the other key thing, I think, to consider as part of a increased storage in the Blythe system. Wastewater treatment on that annual average rated basis, you're in good shape for commitments there. There'd still be the recommendation to look at how to address peak flows and some of the bypassing that's been occurring in the system, both at the plant and at the sewage pumping station. That 80% value that I mentioned just a moment ago related to treatment, really this would be for water or wastewater. It's been kind of a long-standing, like even before my time doing this stuff within the province, kind of a rule of thumb that you start to think about what's next for your infrastructure once you hit that number. And in fact, For wastewater system annual reports, starting a couple of years ago, the ministry started saying, once you hit that number, start telling us in your annual reports, what are your plans to deal with flows above that 80%? Now, your plan could be that it's going to take us years and years to need that last 20%, therefore there's no immediate need to address it. Or in some communities, it could be, geez, growth's happening so fast that we should have started a couple of years ago to plan for it, because once you start planning for treatment system expansion, that begins with identifying the need, then starting a Class CA, and by the time you do that Class CA, do design, get approvals, and build it, you can be anywhere from 3 to 5 years to get to the point where the new system is up and running. And so it's important to consider that in advance. So just the last slide I've got, and then be happy to take any more questions. Findings, recommendations for Wingham Water System would be to continue with the standpipe replacement and going back to the master plan, that was priority 1. On the wastewater side of things in Wingham, both the Josephine Street sewage pumping station, that northwest trunk sewer, will need capacity increase to accommodate development, but really I'd suggest the priority of each of those projects really depends on development status and how soon it's anticipated that capacity will be needed. For the Blythe Water System, the standby well to increase firm capacity was identified as priority number 2, and to increase storage, priority 3. And for the Blythe wastewater system, looking at those peak flows and bypasses would be priority 4. And I really don't think there'd be any reason to change the sequencing of priorities considered at that time based on the current situation. So I know that's a pile of information. Thanks for your patience in hearing it, and I'd be very happy to take any further questions if there are any.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Andrew. I'd just like to take questions from members at this time. Deputy Reeve?
Thank you. Through you, it's really not, it's more a question for Dwayne or staff. I was wondering if we could be shown a copy of the 2029. Thank you. I was wondering if this question would be for Dwayne, if we could get a copy of the 2019 agreement of those flow rates for cross-border servicing. I haven't, this is the first time I've seen those numbers, and if they were agreed upon in 2019, it's just a large jump from them agreeing to 682 and now not wanting 60. So I'm just curious if we could get a copy of that agreement. Thank you.
Councillor Wright?
Yeah, again, it's a question more directed to staff. Where are we with those 4 priorities? Like, what level of design is done? I'm sure, obviously some level of design is done, but like, are we done detailed design so we could go out to tender when we're ready, or just curious what the status of those 4 projects is?
Here's our Public Works. Jump.
Through Reeve Heifer to Councillor Wright. So the standpipe project in Wingham is a go. We're currently under design is being done, and we're going to be going to tender very shortly for that. The rest of the projects I'll be looking at in the upcoming water wastewater budget, which will come to you folks in the very near future.
Okay, appreciate it. I'm always a big fan of going as far as detailed design and getting getting really accurate numbers. It really helps for long-term capital planning. And when you're talking about things like design of a trunk line for a sewer, it doesn't get stale dated. It doesn't go bad. So I think it's something we should consider as progressing a lot of these projects as far as getting detailed design done so we can get the best estimates possible for capital planning.
Thank you. Any other questions? Again, thank you very much, Andrew, and I know that we can always get a hold of you, and we've done that before and appreciate that. open line work with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now we move on to number 7, reports. 7.2.1, financial 2023-07, updated asset disposal transfer policy. Are there any questions for Director Towns? See? None? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. I noticed in the proposed policy, the word reuse, okay, like that. How strong is that word going to be used? Like, just a minute. I'd like to see that if one department finds something surplus, will they ask the other departments if they have a need of it?
Through you, Reeve Heffer to Council Palmer, yes, that would be a high level of expectation.
Good.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Towns? Seeing none. That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the report from the Director of Finance Treasurer dated March 6, 2023 regarding a proposed update to the Township Asset Disposal Transfer Policy for information purposes. And further that the Council approves the updated Asset Disposal Transfer Policy as presented. And further that Council directs the clerk to prepare a bylaw for the March 2023 regular meeting to adopt the updated asset disposal transfer policy. May I have a mover? Councillor Wright, seconder. Councillor Palmer. All in favor? Carried. Move on to 7.4.1. Public Works 2023-04, sale of surplus gravel. Are there any questions for Director Fortney, please? Go ahead, Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. Yeah, just curious, is the rest of the pit looking this way, as far as, we'll call it dirty?
Through you, Reeve Heffert, Councillor Palmer. It's difficult to say at this point, but we're kind of going by section, but we are getting what we need for our purposes, and this is all excess material that's been screened off the top. So we will still continue to get this dirty material, and I'm being upfront and transparent when I say that, but we are looking good for the next few years, and then we'll likely have to get into a new license to potentially go below the water table. And if that is successful, then we'll have an additional 20 years.
And that would be basically clean then, cleaner.
Cleaner material, yes, granular A and granular M material.
Thank you. Any other questions for our Director Fortney? Okay, thank you. That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the Director of Public Works and Facilities dated March 6, 2023 regarding the sale of surplus gravel from the North Huron gravel pit, and further that the Council authorized the Director of Public Works and Facilities and Director of Finance Treasurer to deem the excess gravel as surplus, and further that Council authorizes the Director of Public Works and Facilities to advertise the surplus gravel for the sale on open market, and further that Council authorizes the Director of Finance Treasurer to transfer the proceeds from the sale of the surplus gravel into a newly created pits and quarry license rehabilitation reserve fund for future use. May I have a mover? Councillor McBurney, Deputy Faulkner, all in favor? Carried. Public Works 2023-05, tender for products and services, calcium chloride. Are there any questions for Director Fortney? Seeing none, that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the report from the Director of Public Works and Facilities dated March 6, 2023 regarding the 2023 tender for products and services calcium chloride for information purposes, and that further that the council accepts the lowest tendered price provided by Daily in the amount of 29 cents per liter of liquid calcium chloride, 35% solution equaling $141,984 excluding HST as a pre-budget approval purchase. A mover? Councilor Van Heersen? Councilor Whitfield, all in favor? Carried. 2023-01 transfer of sale proceeds from the 2000 Freightliner fire truck to fire department reserves. Are there any questions for Chief Redmond? Not seeing any. That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the Fire Chief dated March 6, 2022 regarding the transfer of sale proceeds from the 2000 Freightliner fire truck to Fire Department reserves for information purposes. And further, that Council directs the Director of Finance Treasurer to transfer the $11,932.50 in proceeds received from the sale of the 2000 Freightliner fire truck from revenue account 01-2100-6955 to the fire long-term reserve account. We have a mover. Councilor Wright, Deputy Faulkner, all in favor. Carried. 7.6.1 CAO 2023-04 Business Improvement Area Governance and Procedural Bylaw. Are there any questions for Dimitri? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Reeve. I thought the idea was to make the Blythe and the Wingham Business Improvement Areas governance and procedure bylaw the same, and now I see there's still differences. Is there any possibility that we can pick things out and say, yes, you can do that, or no, you can do that, or is this the best proposal?
Here comes Dimitri, please.
Okay. Good evening, Council and Reeve. So through you, Reeve Heffer, to Councillor Van Hittersum. We did some research on the Municipal Act and how the BIA constitutions and procedural bylaws can be amended. So they can be amended at any time. It doesn't have to be through an annual general meeting. The reason that there remains some differences was just at the AGM. We were talking to the members and trying to reflect as best as possible in the constitutions what they wanted to maintain. Are there any differences that you specifically wanted to bring up?
Well, the the BIA is looking for members from service clubs and the theater and churches, and I don't see the necessity to do that, to pick certain areas to have a representative there. Wingham doesn't do that, and they're doing fine. I think it's good to have representatives, but not mandatory.
Yeah. So through the Reeve.
I understand that they want the people from the service clubs and the theater, but I'm not sure about the churches. There are only 3 churches in Blythe, so why do they need such a representative in the BIA?
Mm-hmm. Through the Reeve to Councillor Van Hittersum. That's completely up to council. What we've reflected here in the draft is what we heard at the BIA AGM, is that they would like to keep those positions. I talked with the president of the OBIAA, which is the Ontario Business Improvement Area Association, as to whether or not we're restricted through the Municipal Act in how you can have a board of management on these BIA board of managements, and they said it's up to council. If they want to keep those positions, they can. Even if members are not paying the levy, they're able to have certain service groups or churches or a festival representative on the board of management, And so, because there were no objections at the AGM from any members that were in attendance to keeping that structure, that's why we left the Constitution the same. And then I figured if it would come up at council, then I would explain like this, that it can be changed, and leave it up to council as to whether they want to receive this and take the recommendation that was presented at by the BIA members at the AGM, or change it to some other structure. I don't know if that helps. Or
Yeah,
is it
it does, but it's like, I would prefer that they were the same, actually. And same for the industrial representation in Wingham. It is like, why don't they want it? Or
Yeah.
it's more the reason why than
Yeah, so through the Reeve.
why they want it.
Yes, so through the Reeve to Councillor Van Hittersum. On the industrial component, typically industrial land is not levied for BIAs. It's usually the main street and the core or highway commercial areas. And so what we've done there with the Wingham BIA is we've given industrial companies the option as an associate member to pay the levy, but not mandated them to pay the levy. And again, that was something that everyone at the meeting was okay with for the Wingham BIA annual general meeting. And we're just using best practices in terms of who's usually levied. Although the Municipal Act allows for industrial and commercial lands, it's not a common practice. And so on that part, that's why there's a difference in industrial land being levied between the two BIAs.
Councillor Wright?
Yeah, through you, I think the difference in the Constitution may just be the kind of almost the different vision or the different projects each BIA has in mind. I know attending the Wingham BIA meetings, they're very focused on downtown core Main Street. They're doing new benches. They put out the pots every year. So that's one of the reasons why they felt that it doesn't really make sense for the industrial properties to be there, because they don't benefit from the projects they're having or planning to do. So I'm only guessing. I haven't been to the Blythe BIA, but I'm just kind of thinking the membership of the Blythe BIA is probably getting set up because of what projects they have in store and kind of what that Blythe BIA plans to do in the near future. So just a thought of why it may be that way.
Thank you. Any other questions for Dimitri? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, if there's no other questions, I'd like to make a motion to accept the bylaws as presented, but not to agree to the request of the Blythe BIA regarding gender language in their constitution, the non-gender language.
Do I need a seconder, please?
I'll second.
Okay, Councillor Van Hittersum?
Conversation?
Okay, could we have, okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Deputy,
Yeah, I'm just curious as to what problem with the changing of the wording would have to do with council. I'm just, I replacing him or her with person. I don't understand what the problem is. What does that change? I'm just curious as to invoke council's decision to change.
go ahead, Councillor Wright.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think, those kind of decisions are kind of personal decisions. If the Blythe BA feels that's what they're most comfortable with, I don't see the role of council in overruling that myself.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Palmer.
Well, excuse me, if you watch the news, especially in the States, it's a movement, and it started down there, at least in our part of the world. And it's slowly migrating here. And I see it's just changing basically humanity. It's what we've always had, and what is wrong with he and her and Mr. and Mrs. and Miss and all that business. That's what we're used to. And if you start changing it in this little corner in Blythe, it's going to migrate. And that's something that is a great concern of mine anyways. And I think it's not a necessary change. If somebody wants to identify themselves that way personally, fine, doesn't matter, you can do what you want. But when it starts hitting, it basically enters our corporation. That's what it does. And so I just asked, is that something that you want to have a change? Do you want to change what we have and what we value and what we're used to? And yeah.
Yeah, I can read back the motion if that's what you're looking for. So the motion on the floor would be that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the report of the Economic Development Officer dated March 6, 2023 regarding the Blythe and Wingham Business Improvement Governance and Procedural Bylaw for information purposes, and further that Council approves the updated governance and procedural bylaw constitutions for the Wingham BIA and Blythe BIA as presented, and further that Council does not agree to the further requested change to the Blythe BIA Constitution to use non-gendered language, and further that Council directs the clerk to prepare bylaws to adopt the updated constitutions for the Wingham BIA and Blythe BIA for the March 20th, 2023 regular council meeting. Your mover is Councillor Palmer, and your seconder is Councillor Van Henderson.
Any more comments from floor? Show of hands, those in favor? Denied.
So we will be looking for direction on that, though.
So, Reeve, I would make a motion that the amended BIA constitutions be accepted as presented.
Okay, mover, please. Councillor Deputy Reeve Faulkner? Okay.
So I need some further clarity on that. I'm assuming basically to accept it as presented with also the inclusion of the gendered, yeah, okay.
Yes, agreed.
So and who's your seconder, sir?
Yeah, Deputy Reeve was seconder.
So the motion on the floor would be that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the report of the Economic Development Officer dated March 6, 2023 regarding the Blythe and Wingham Business Improvement Area Governance and Procedural Bylaw for information purposes, and further that Council approves the updated governance and procedural bylaws constitutions for the Wingham BIA and Blythe BIA as presented, and further that Council agrees to the further requested change to the Blythe BIA Constitution to use non-gendered language, and further that Council directs the clerk to prepare bylaws to adopt the updated constitutions for the Wingham BIA and Blythe BIA for the March 20th, 2023 regular council meeting.
All in favor? Carried. CAO 2023-05 Hutton Heights Property Agreement of Purchase and Sale. Are there any questions for Dimitri? I'm sure happy to see this and looking forward to getting some of the much needed housing in our township. Do I have a mover? Councillor Van Henderson, seconder Councillor Whitfield. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Dimitri. Wingham BIA letter of ratification of BI board appointees. Are there any questions? Clerk Lamb will read the motion, please.
So the recommended motion of the BIA, of the Wingham BIA coming out of their annual general meeting for board members to be appointed to the 2022-2026 term would be that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby approves the following appointments to the Wingham Business Improvement Area Board for the 2022 to 2026 term of council. Dave Tiffin, Doug Kivenhoven, Carolyn Young, Annette Monsma, Jim Snyder, Ryan Ferguson, Joey Havers, and then Councilor Wright is already appointed by council as the council rep. And further, that council directs for the appointment to boards and committees bylaw to be updated to reflect the appointments.
May I have a mover? Councillor Wright, seconder. Councillor Whitfield, all in favor? Carried. Blythe BIA letter of ratification of BIA board appointees. Are there any questions for Clerk Lamb before he reads the motion? Seeing none?
So again, similar to the Wingham BIA, these are the names the AGM is looking, or the membership of the Blythe BIA is looking to appoint out of their AGM meeting for the 2022 to 2026 term. So the motion would be that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby approves the following appointments to the Blythe Business Improvement Area Board for the 2022 to 2026 term of council. David Sparling, Shane Yerma, Kat O'Donnell, Sydney Soares, Angela Cullen, John Stewart, Joanne Todd, Rachel King, and then council has already appointed Deputy Reeve Falconer as the council appointee. And further, that council directs for the appointment to boards and committees bylaw to be updated to reflect the appointments.
May I have a mover? Councillor McBurney, Deputy Reeve Faulkner, all in favor? Carried. Activity period, participate in the coldest night of the walk. In a week ago Saturday, they had a great turnout, and they're very happy with the results of that. And also coming up on Wednesday is starting of the budget for the county coming up. So at this time, I've council member reports. Those who sit on boards or committees, written or verbal, please. Councillor Wright.
Yes, through you, Reeve. Just going to provide a brief update on the Alice Munro, the Festival of the Short Story. They're very far advanced in their planning for this upcoming season. It is the first time in 3 years that there's been in-person sessions, so they're having to kind of relearn a few things. But yeah, they're at a very advanced state of planning, so it looks like it is going to be another successful year for that festival. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Comments by members. Go ahead, Councillor Whit.
Yeah, through you, Reeve. I just wanted to talk about a staff posting which was put in place for the deaccessioning of the Wingham artifacts. My daughter was actually looking for jobs last night, and she notified me of it. You know, I guess I was a bit taken aback. I wasn't, I guess, aware that we were going to hire staff and do this directly. I don't know if other people were aware. I knew we had to pay for it. I knew we had budget for it, right? But I didn't know we were going to do this internally. Just my feeling is hiring more staff should always be the last resort. More staff takes time from existing management. It's human resources burden. You have to find a place for them. You know, if there's another option out there other than hiring staff directly, I always think we should always look for that. So anyways, I just wonder if there's another plan or another concept. Again, my daughter worked at Huron County Museums last summer. She actually did some work with artifacts, so through her stories, I know the level of expertise and stuff that's available there. So I just don't know if there's another option out there other than hiring staff and doing this internally. Because again, just my philosophy, we've seen our administration costs, you know, spike a lot over the last 2 years. So I think, you know, we should have the mindset that hiring more staff should always be the last resort.
Could anybody like to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, through your, just staff, I was under the understanding that was a contract position, and it wasn't internal, or could, well, anyone could apply for a contract. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm just kind of first hearing it that it's a staff position.
Go ahead, CAO, please.
Yeah, through you, Reeve, just in terms of, so in terms of, it's a as Deputy Reeve has pointed out, it's a contract position for the balance of this year, and then subject to council approval in terms of continuation to 2024. In terms of internal, we don't have the expertise on staff, so we are looking to bring somebody on staff on a contract position to assist us with this. In addition to that, we're also working very closely with the county on this initiative. So this individual that will be working with us is also going to be working kind of in a consultative role, maybe would be the best way to describe it, with the county. So it's, but just going back to your earlier comment in terms of it had always been the plan that the individual would be hired by the municipality. That enables us and gives us control over the project in terms of ensuring that's completed in accordance with the direction that council so wishes.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Wright.
Yeah, so I mean, good reasons. To me, it would have been, I mean, the way I would prefer to have seen it gone would be for, you know, the Huron, if it's going to be done in association with Huron County Museum, for them to hire and direct the staff and have us just, you know, basically pay for the money for it. But again, that's a personal preference. Even if it's a contract position, that person's going to have to report to staff, right? Staff time, as we've been reminded, is valuable. And so to me, it just seems there would have been could have been better ways possibly to have this done.
Right. Okay, thank you. Yes, go ahead, Councillor Palmer, please.
Yeah, thanks, Reeve. Yeah, I was just wondering about the report that is from the joint committee with, along with the Columbus Center Board. Like, we met, and I see it as a timely one for us and for them. And I was just wondering, like, this was I would call it a light agenda. I was just wondering why maybe it didn't show up tonight, or when do you expect it to?
Go ahead, CO.
Yes, through you, Reeve. So just in terms of staff's priority right now is getting our budget completed. And as soon as we are able to proceed with that process, and I'm sure council wants to make that, move that quickly as well. So we're moving forward with the budget process. So that's staff's priority. As soon as we get the budget in tow, then certainly that report will be brought forward.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, were there any more comments by members? Seeing none. And 9.4, notice of motion. Bylaws. 10.1, bylaw number 15/2023, agreement of purchase and sale of Hutton Heights developed lands. Number 11.
You need a mover.
Oh, sorry, yeah, forgot it. Mover, please. Deputy Reeve, Councillor McBurney. All in favor? Carried. Announcements. A special council meeting will be held Monday, March 13th, 2023 at 6 p.m. in the North Huron Town Hall Theater. Our next regular council meeting will be held on Monday, March 20th, 2023 at 6 p.m. in North Huron Town Hall Theater. And the next Wingham BIA Board meeting will be held Thursday, March 16th, 2023 at 6:30 in the Hot Stove Lounge at North Huron West Cask Community Complex. And the next Blythe BIA Board meeting will be held on Thursday, March 30th, 2023 at 8 a.m. in the Blythe Community Center. Are there any other announcements? Seeing none. Other business, 12.1. Notice of motion request from Deputy Faulkner.
Thank you, Reeve. After much consideration and knowing that a future council meeting, special council meeting next week, is coming forward with more clarity and information on some of the recreation decisions and some of the RFPs that were going out, I find it would be prudent and ill-timed if I presented this motion at this time. I think it deserves the information that's coming forward in the next couple of weeks before I would wish this motion to go forward. So at this time, I would like to remove or rescind my motion at this time.
Okay, thank you. Closed session and reporting out, none. 14, conformatory bylaw. Bylaw number 1623, 2023, conformatory bylaw. May I have a mover? Councillor Palmer, seconder. Councillor Van Hitterson, all in favor? Carried. Adjournment, that the Council of the Township of North Huron agrees that there being no further business before council, the meeting may be hereby adjourned at
7:36 p.m.
7:36 p.m. May I have a mover? Councillor McBurney, seconder. Councillor Wright, all in favor?